Let's see about that chat.
I feel like I learned a lot about design education. I didn't know some of those things.
I didn't know about the accreditation. That seems like a pretty basic piece of knowledge about design education.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And not just for design, but lots of things can be accredited, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And it frightens me that what I understood that there are like design programs in this country running without accreditation, and I don't think they are much less expensive than the accredited ones.
Oh, yeah, that's a big problem with American education in general. You have expensive, bad shit.
Yeah, do you find the fact that we pay for design education kind of like shocking, Margaret, actually?
Maybe not, because the all education is paid for, but I think that like art colleges should be for sure cheaper than med school. And when you look at some private art colleges, they're not much more cheaper.
Mm.
And sometimes there is really good value, like CCA, but sometimes you just look at the student project and you're like, oh man, and how much did you have to invest in it? Like you don't have much to go get a job in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how is someone supposed to think about value of their degree before they're done with it, before they're in the industry, getting an actual paycheck? I don't think it's fair to say that students have to try to project into the future like that. They should just go where they want to go, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe when you're doing grad school, like she said, thinking hard about like how long it would take you to pay yourself back.
True.
That's fair. But I don't actually think you make much more with a grad degree in design than you do without one. It seems like it would be pretty on par.
Yeah, it's all skills based, and you like learn a lot on the job, which you couldn't do as a lawmaker or like attorney.
But you work up so much specific experience from your work that if you wanted to get out of it, going and doing the master's can be a quicker way than trying to break into a new industry potentially, because you can take a step back and say, I'm really specifically interested in this, and cultivate that in a different setting if you can swing the cost.
Yeah, I mean, the cost is, you can't get around it, but being in school is, I think, so good for the way that you think about design. Like, definitely going and getting hands-on knowledge and then returning to a space where, like, ideas are celebrated and, it's not all driven just by business and stuff. Like, that has to be good for your creative design brain. Probably why the students that you're talking about in that school were so good, because they still got to come back to school after having been professionals for that year. Just being a student feels good, I think. Like, lets you have space to really, like, be inquisitive and curious in a way that, like, you have to work quite hard to do in professional life.
Gosh, Kate, are you gonna go back to school? I say
PhD.
Stuff like that, you guys pigpile on me.
Yeah, I'm gonna skip my master's and get a PhD.
I liked school, but when I think about writing another thesis, I'm not saying making a thesis project, writing the thesis, I think I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I don't miss homework. Nobody does. It's not fun.
It'd be kind of cool to call one of you doctor, though. Welcome to Beyond Ray, women-led conversations on industrial design. We wanted to start today's episode with a pretty exciting announcement that we'll be at Women in Design Deep Dive by IDSA in Chicago. We're presenting on the first day, March 29th in the afternoon. We hope to see you there. You can check out some more information about that on our website, beyondraypodcast.com, in the show notes. And moving right along to our first guest episode of 2023, I'm here with Kate and Margaret, and we're so happy to introduce Professor Kiersten Muenchinger from University of Oregon. She's an associate professor I was fortunate enough to meet her in person at last year's IDC. It was in Seattle. Thanks to my former professor, Jason Germany, for introducing us. You guys used to work together, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, super happy to have you here. I think this conversation on design education has been a long time coming. Maybe let's start off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself. Is that all right?
Sure. So let's start with my background because it's different than a lot of design educators, or maybe different than a lot of educators, but maybe similar to a lot of design educators. My background educationally is mechanical engineering, followed by a graduate degree in design. And I didn't come straight into teaching. I worked for design consultancies like IDEO and Fitch and Sazza Associati in Italy. I worked for large corporations like Ford Motor Company and Walt Disney Imagineering. I worked for a nonprofit called the Long Now Foundation, working on the design and construction of a 10,000-year lasting clock. And I started my own business, which was a gift box business. And the boxes were predominantly used by for weddings as wedding favor boxes. And they were also used a lot by crafters. But that was the business I had when I came to the University of Oregon. And I sold that business so that I could come here to start a product design program here, because that was the most exciting thing I could possibly do in my whole life, was start a new product design program.
Wow, I had no idea you started it. What did University of Oregon have in terms of design when you showed up? Any other types of design?
Yeah, the University of Oregon has a really long history of an architecture program, and it's quite well known, especially in the area, for having a sustainability bent before sustainability was a thing. So long history of architecture, and also landscape architecture, interior architecture, and then a very good program in art and digital art as well. So that's how we came to be, is the architecture and art programs work together to meld us into what already exists here with existing studio classes and the kind of core courses that students for architecture and art classes take, how those could be prereqs for someone in design. And so when our program started, it started as sort of a finishing school, a third and fourth year that you would put on to the first two that you started with. And over the years, as our program built, because it was filling this vast hole in Oregon with all of these design-oriented businesses, we've had a lot of people come and be here. So now we're a full 4-year BFA and have a master's program specifically in sports product design.
That's incredible.
That's what I knew about the sports product, because it's sort of surprising that is so established, and and that the product design program is relatively new. I mean, I don't know, would you still call it new? Maybe that's not quite right on my terms.
I think if you look at it academically, just about any product design program, industrial design program is new, right? I always compare it to classics. Or,
sure. Okay.
What's older?
Yeah.
We're new. Yeah.
Do you know which programs in the US have the longest history in industrial design?
Ooh, you know what? I don't. That's a really good question.
We should add that fact check in post.
Yeah.
We should check it out.
New feature.
Let's go for something in the Midwest, right?
That does make sense. Yeah.
Detroit cars. And the big architects. I know that like in Poland, the first industrial design program was at my university, and it was established in 1965, if I correct right.
Cool.
That makes sense. And then there were multiple designers who came from the Bauhaus to the Chicago area. So could be around there.
That wouldn't be surprising. Yeah. Well, you were really busy before you decided to start teaching. I mean, you listed, gosh, I don't know, 10 companies? How many did you just say that you had a stint at in a relatively short amount of time, it seems. What was the sort of longest chunk of time you spent at one of them?
Ooh, the longest chunk of time I spent at one of them. Gosh, I'd have to look at my own resume for that. But I'm going to guess something like 2 years, maybe 3.
Wow. Okay. Nice.
Yeah. And a lot of that is just figuring out what do you want? Like one of the things that I found that really interested me at the time was when I was at Disney, I realized, yeah, this isn't it. It was like the best job ever. It was an Imagineer. It was in research and development within Imagineering, which is like the most far out of the far out stuff. And it was sort of it's fun, but this isn't really what I want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that until being there and doing it.
Did you have to go all the way out to kind of the most extreme blue sky job you could have to realize that? Or had you had tastes of that along the way? I'm curious why you went to that job, since I also know that you really value like making things go into production or become realized. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the opportunity it was really great at the time. So that was the main reason for going. It was a big carrot. And so and I can't tell you exactly why, other than like name brand kind of stuff, Disney and R&D and Imagineering, all of that was really, really great. And my boss was outstanding at the time too.
Mm.
But like prior to that, I had worked at IDEO, which was also very, big blue sky, lots of very different kinds of projects. And so it wasn't necessarily that was the thing. I think that wanting to do something that's very known to people was probably part of it. And that kind of falls into what I had been saying earlier, that it's important to feel like your work as a designer is being valued. And part of that is it being produced. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the things that I worked on in design consultancies never ended up being produced. It's strange. Like you're hired, you've got people paying you a lot of money for this stuff. You're doing your best stuff. You're being so creative. It's really great. And it's being vetted while you're working on it by both the other people that you're working with in the consultancy, as well as by the people who are hiring you. So why doesn't it get produced? It's still a really odd part of design in general that it's not something that we talk about a lot, even in academia. Well, actually, I guess I probably talk about it quite a bit because it's a thing. I try to let people know that it's a thing.
Yeah. Was it one of the reasons that made you attracted to starting a program and shaping the new generation of designers?
Well, in itself, probably not. Like being able to tell people my experiences, probably not necessarily. The things that felt really enticing about it were I was working in the Silicon Valley area during the whole startup frenzy thing, and part of starting the box space business that I had was part of that. That's what everyone was doing. It was really cool and fun and hip to start your own whatever. And so being able to start a design program fell into that cool thing that was happening at the time. And then to be able to come here, I thought that they were doing, like during the whole recruitment process, I thought they were just being super smart about how they were envisioning the program, and working with smart people, but being able to do my own thing. That was a cool combo. That's what I remember being the most enticing bits. I had also at the time, being in Silicon Valley, I was working as an adjunct professor at California College of the Arts, which a lot of folks in the San Francisco area do. And that's one of the assets of that school like crazy, is just having all of these people from all different kinds of firms come in and teach to you. So I had a really good taste of adjunct teaching, and I knew I really liked it. And one of the funny things about, like, if you're analyzing, what am I doing? What am I spending my time on? And while I was teaching, I was spending an awful lot of time on teaching, and I wasn't being compensated for it. It wasn't like my other, whether I was consulting or working on my own business. So I was spending an amount of time that I thought, well, maybe this is what I should do, as opposed to it being my side hustle.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about all the other famous designers that have been going
through California College of the Arts?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, when I was there, I was the associate chair for Yves Bahar. So he's a pretty famous fellow. We had, people made short stints for from all over the place, like really.
Yeah.
The other big famous folks who came through, James Dyson came through, and we had him come and do a workshop lecture type thing. We had Johnny Ive come through.
Ooh.
And that was like a really hard get at the time because he's in such high demand. He didn't do that an awful lot while he was still at Apple.
Wow. I hope those students just what did they do in the class? That must be wild to have somebody come through that you can learn from like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty neat.
I have another Silicon Valley related question, slight tangent, but what do you think a company needs to be worth starting? You've seen so many people take this idea and launch it. You launched one, which sounds like it was a cool experience for you. And I know that as you talk about design, it's important to you that things get realized. But I feel like you must also have a threshold where you're sort of like, okay, starting this as a company or producing this as a product could have not enough merit. So how do you sort of delineate when you think it's worth having that phase be part of the design process or, product life cycle?
For a product specifically or for business?
Either way.
I think it's different.
Okay. Well, I think I was asking business because of Silicon Valley, but I think product is more relevant to our audience and to us. So either one is interesting, honestly.
Okay. So the quick snippet I'll say for a business is just having a passion for it. My experience was the business that I started because I wanted to know why products didn't get out on the market. And so I did not go into it with a desire to be selling boxes, to be in the wedding industry, to that wasn't my thing.
Sure.
And it was a detriment to the business overall. I didn't have the passion for that product, even though it was quite successful. And that was a problem. And so passion for it is the thing for a business, I think. For a product, then there's a whole host of things. Because the things that I found that go into all of the realization of it coming out on the market, so many. What do people like? What do people not like? Even though you have fabulous taste as a designer, that doesn't mean that everyone else shares your fabulous taste. What the costs are, so supply chain stuff that we found so much during COVID, that was a thing that I was like, oh, when I learned about just my the amount of capital that I was once it went through, the product got produced, got sold, came back around to me, I was like, oh, this is one of those basic principles. I get this now. So there are just all those little factors, and having enough space in the product line to be able to absorb what other people like and do that you haven't accounted for. Those are the most important things about the product, I think, is just having a cushion around so that you can see what people are going to like.
So did that business answer all of your questions about why things don't get made?
I don't know that they were so well articulated that I could check off every checkoff box, but it definitely gave me the appreciation of the folks who really want to account for the supply chain stuff, the daily, what comes in, what comes out, the sales team. I appreciate those much more than I did as a designer.
Okay. I wonder, what do you think about a designer working with many different startups in the Valley, which were questionable from high level? I'm thinking of Theranos and Juicero, And I just realized that both of them was Yves Behar.
You don't have to comment if you don't want to.
We can also cut anything. Yeah.
I'll tell you about one that I worked on that I thought was just awful. There was a startup company that I was designing for that again, this was like in the heyday of everyone, like it was cool to have a startup business and it was cool to have a Stanford startup. So there was a bunch of Stanford MBA students starting this business to create basically like a toy box that would sit outside your house so that packages could be delivered to it. So we were designing the toy box and the lock system and how the lock system would work with UPS and FedEx and your post office. And it was really interesting. The problem with that startup, though, was that there were just too many cooks. And you could I was just a little old designer, but discussions with them, there were too many voices in the room trying to decide what was going to happen on something, such that nothing ever got decided. And I don't even know where they got their capital from, but they must have spent through it super quickly. And I don't know whatever happened to that, but it was really uncomfortable. I did not care for being on that project because it just felt like this is going nowhere. And I feel bad for these people.
Wow. So even to the level that you would sort of get like different design direction from day to day about like somebody else's idea kind of pushing to the front? No,
it was more that no decision was ever made on the design direction. So we could just do whatever we wanted.
Oh man, that does sound frustrating. Jeez.
You want your design to be valued as fun as it is to get to do what you want. Like you want some feedback that says that someone cares.
Right.
Yeah.
And constraints help making decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. In student projects too, much as students say they don't like constraints, they do. Projects are always better with more constraints.
Yeah, I really liked projects with constraints when I was a student. I just floundered when the canvas was too blank.
Yeah. I think as a professional, you even start to realize there's nothing worse than people saying the joke design critique line, which is like, I don't know what I don't like, or like, I'll know it when I see it, or I'll, you know what I mean? Like that aimlessness is a problem. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm curious, before we talk about your student projects in more detail, do you think that the mechanical engineering background makes you think about design also in a more concrete way? You know, like, do you feel like you need this, or you value this directionality and sort of goal setting at all because of having to make products like very functional?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm always one of the more practical people on a team. Always have been. But that's what I like. I dig it. That's why I'm there. That's my value, right?
Yes.
so yeah, I do. I like that.
Yeah. I appreciate people like you very much in the room.
Oh,
to
thank
make
you.
Things a reality. What was it like to have that thought process and be doing very blue sky projects? You know, were you the person in there that was still sort of trying to ground it in reality?
It doesn't ring true. Like the blue sky stuff is just, it's fun. It's fun for everyone to be involved in. So I don't think so. I mean, there's a time and a place. And so once the rubber needs to hit the road, then the problem changes. The fun problem becomes, how do you make this real?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Until that point, the blue sky stuff was super fun. One of the funnest blue sky projects I ever worked on. So back in the mid-90s, there was a really good knowledge of how to make silicone, how to work with silicone, how to mold silicone. And there were no silicone products back then. And the reason for this is that there had been one silicone product until that point, and the bottom fell out of that market, or perhaps the top fell out of that market, because that market was breast implants. And so there were all of these like grades of silicone that were, they were implantable. They were non-toxic. They could handle all kinds of different temperatures and be stable. Silicone was really well developed for all kinds of stuff. And we had a silicone vendor come to our design firm and say, What would you do with this? Look how we can color it. Look how we can texture it. Look how we can make it in different durometers, stretchinesses. Look how we can add glitter to it. What would you do with this stuff? And so we went in, like one of the things that you do with new materials is you go into kitchen products, because kitchen is where we as consumers spend a lot of our money. That's like, our command center in the house is the kitchen. And so everything that you see now that is, hot pads and muffin tins that you can just pop the muffin out of. I think at least I see those things and I go back to, oh, that's from way back then when they were asked us, what can you do with silicone?
That's such a funny origin story. I love that.
I feel like there's a little bit of vicarious accomplishment through like working on the origin of silicone products, and then someone else is creating probably a lot of chef-in products, a lot of Joseph. You get to see that and take some joy in that when you see it in the store.
Absolutely.
So I think we wanted to get into a little bit about like, you got to shape this program at University of Oregon. What does that look like for your students? And was there a process of like distilling your curriculum, or was that already happening at CCA and you were like fully formed professor at that point?
I'll start on trying to answer that by saying that the main important parts of coming into the program that was like there already had to be the bones of a curriculum set up before I even came, so that the program could launch. And that had been done through the architecture and art faculty who were developing this and recruiting to bring faculty in for it, because that all has to be approved. And in a state school system, it has to be approved by the state. So there were bones, and we had to start with the bones that had been set for us and then kind of flesh out from there. So with the program that was the bones that were here for our program at UO as finishing school, the 3rd and 4th year, it was how to differentiate product design from the art and the architecture that had been core classes that everyone might have taken. And so that was, some of it was, the practical stuff that I nerd out on. What are the mechanical, manufacturing, material issues that you have to deal with it so that something can actually be produced? Or drawing. What is the difference between drawing for art and drawing for design? What's the importance in getting the kind of idea across that you need to get across? And how is that different in art and design? And design for users. What is a user? Are you just the user? And what's the difference between you as the user in something that is a craft-based discipline, or even an art-based discipline in something like ceramics or metalsmithing, which are two of the programs that we utilize a lot in art, but that is different for a design process, more appropriate to product design. So a lot of the first part was just differentiation between the programs. Over time, and as the program developed and we could add more courses, what became important is really like, what's the breadth of design? And allowing the students that we had to see, well, there's metalsmithing and ceramics, for example, which we had because those were programs that we could build off of that were here already, and fibers and textiles as well, those three. But what is furniture? And what is not fabric and associated with fabric and textile, but what is shoes and what is soft goods, as opposed to what you're learning in fabric and textile, and how can we build off of that? And also in our area being unique, why would someone come here, and what kinds of jobs are someone going to get from here going out into the world different than other places? How do we fit with sports product? Mm-hmm. What do you need to know about the history of sports product, especially since Nike started from UO? Mm-hmm. And how does that influence design in this area? So breadth of product was the next thing that we had to do. And then that last thing, specificity of the area. And I think that that's one of the things that I think actually all of the product design programs and industrial design programs in the United States are really good at fleshing out what is unique about their area of the country, and how that ties into their program. Whether it's like, in the Midwest, there's still a lot of manufacturing. So you can go into a lot of in-house manufacturing type jobs, more so than you can in California.
Right.
And California has more consultancies. So you can go into more consultancy work and more tech work versus us, where we do have some tech work because we're still associated with this whole Pacific Northwest and California corridor. And so we teach tech as well, but we do also have this heavy influence of sports product. And so like, what is it about the area? And if you're going to have people come from other places, which like only 10% of students leave their state to go to college. So if you're going to leave your state, if you're just trying to get like that little 10%, what is it that you're doing that's different, that's going to bring them to, a kid coming from Florida, why would they go to CCA versus University of Oregon? Well, and it could be because they might want to do tech, or they might want to do sports product and have more influence of what's going on in that area.
Right.
Wow, that statistic is wild. Only 10% of kids leaving their state to go to college anywhere else for any other purpose?
There you are, Kate.
Yeah, wow.
That's you.
Jeez.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask about it because it's great how different design colleges differentiate in their specialization across different states. But the problem is that maybe kids are often not even aware what industrial design is. They find it out while going and studying something else. But it's pretty unfortunate that because of this huge difference in fees between state and out-of-state education, even if you would be decided that, like, I live in, let's say, East Coast, but really want to get into sports goods, and like maybe Oregon, Washington would be the place to go, or California, it's an obstacle to go.
It is.
Follow it. And on the other hand, let's say you're 17, you discovered ID and you think, okay, this is the program I will sign up for. And you come out of the UO basically as maybe soft goods designer just because of the location.
Yeah.
I think it's great for like exchange student, let's say from, Europe, China, to just go and pick which program I really want to go because I'm moving anywhere anyway. So maybe there is more freedom in making a conscious decision.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I now wish I had learned a lot more soft goods, and I look down at Oregon and I look at the kids in school in Utah and Colorado, and I'm just like, oh man, they are so lucky,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, what do you think the baseline or benchmarks of curriculum should be? Do you think that they should be more uniform across programs, or do you think that specialization is necessary, and how could you balance it?
Well, they are actually kind of uniform across programs because we all want to be accredited by NASAD. This is the National Association of Schools of Art and Design. We want that accreditation because it holds us, with our peers and to a standard that other schools have. And it's one of the things that we can differentiate ourselves versus, College of Phoenix kind of thing that comes in and says we do design now or something like that.
Shots fired.
Yeah. So we want to be competitive in that space. So we want, and it's like for all degrees, we want our BA, our BS, our BFA, our MS to all have those standards that they'll be recognized other places. And so that someone coming into a program, even though it's, it's not exact, you can transfer and generally have kind of the same sorts of things that you're going to be offered at other schools and, pass out of the courses that you're transferring over. It's not exact. It's never exact, but it's pretty good.
That's in place. That's interesting. Yeah. We can also look this up and share with our listeners later, but do you happen to know some of the ones that make a product design or industrial design program meet that requirement, that accreditation?
Oh, NASAD? Oh, it's more complicated than what I know off the top of my head.
No problem.
It's like you have to have a certain number of core courses, and those are things like drawing, and it could include skills-based courses, drawing, and we do some physical art-based courses in there, some digital 2D, some digital 3D courses can all be in there. You need to have some history. So art history classes need to be a part of it in some way. It can be specifically design history. It can be broader art history. It can be seminars that deal with history. You need to have some studios. You need to have studios that do this kind of breadth. And I don't remember what the rules are for that, but there need to be like a certain number of studios, a certain number of credit hours, so that students, like, it's known that you're going to be doing practice as opposed to, I don't know, learning about industrial designers and writing papers about them.
Yeah.
This sounds very familiar, which is probably good then for what our schooling was. Do you have like students that transfer into your program from a non like NASAD school seeking a certain caliber of program?
Yep, all the time.
Makes sense.
And in the state systems, we often, the majority of those are coming from 2-year programs. And so we also work with 2-year programs to make sure that if they're taking basic art courses, sometimes things like AutoCAD, which we don't do AutoCAD, but they might have an AutoCAD class, and we want to make sure that they can transfer those credits because it relates.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that happens all the time.
That kind of gets into a question I had about, keeping the profession equitable. I think it's really great to have these high standards for programs and have them maybe be associated with states, but you do run into something Margaret was talking about of if people even know about the industrial design as a field, or if they've like had any exposure to the different skills that would be applicable. So yeah, it sounds like working with those 2-year programs is a pretty cool way to do that. Are there other ways that colleges can be really intentional about that?
One of the things that I would assume most places do, that we do, is you try to get in on the ground floor for folks who are searching. And that's what an introductory course is all about. And then you make your introductory course part of the curriculum, the what is required to graduate with a degree, so that it's not a waste of someone's time if they're taking it. So it does 2 things. It introduces folks. It gives a class that they can meet other folks who are like, there are people that come in as first-year fresh people who are already in the program, who know that they want to do design, have background in it somehow or other. And then they can be next to those folks. The people who don't know what they want to do can be next to those folks, and that will give them some help as well. They're making friends, they're meeting new people. And so that kind of transfer of, oh yeah, I know what this is about, it's really cool because of X, Y, and Z, is one of the things that can help outside of us, outside of us faculty. The students will listen to themselves way more than they listen to us often.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
Do you accept new students based on like portfolio or exam?
Yeah, we have an additional requirement to get into the design program that requires a portfolio, and it requires a short essay and transcripts. So it's another hurdle outside of just being able to declare a major. That's actually a point of discussion, fierce discussion for years and years and years in all design disciplines, of whether or not even just having those extra applications is such a barrier for equity for people that we shouldn't have them anymore.
Interesting.
So, anyone who has never heard of a portfolio, anyone who has never been able to have a class in any kind of art, anything that one would include in a portfolio, anyone who doesn't have the time because they're working, or even the software to be able to put together a portfolio. Like all of those things are we talk about a lot year by year. Like, what do we want to do? Do we want to include this kind of stuff? What are other schools doing? What are other programs doing? Within U of O, product design and architecture talk about it a lot, because both of our disciplines, we are less equitable than the art disciplines in getting in a variety of folks. And so we talk about portfolios as being potentially part of that. And what would it look like if we got rid of those?
I've had that thought even professionally. Like I've had some conversation with designers that it's tricky to figure out how much a percentage of your value when you're getting like looked at for a job or maybe for the major should be a portfolio. It becomes, yeah, just like the entire identity, I think, of designers, even when they're in the professional world. And it's very two-dimensional a lot of the time, you know? I mean, hopefully by this point you have the chops to put it together, but still bears so much weight that I think is a little off balance personally.
I wonder, how do you admit people to program then, like in general? Because there is like design programs aren't as broad as like med or law schools. There is a limited number of spots, and is it just enough candidates, or do you go through the scores GPU from high school, or you focus more on the essay? Like I come from the world where I had to take a 3-day exam and present a portfolio of basically fine arts and pass the design history exam. But this was different situation, like free education, 20 spots on a year.
Wow.
Basically, you compete over 200 candidates. So because everyone could apply, government pays. They had to select on who presents willingness to actually be serious about the program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which you were doing over forcing 17-year-olds to present like 20 paintings and drawings, full B1 size.
So there are absolutely programs, really well-known, good competitive programs who only look at GPA.
Wow.
Oh, GPA. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Not the GPU.
Oh, that's all right.
GPA.
It's not part of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, UW's intro class, I think, is an interesting one because when you're talking about an intro class being a good way for design students who know that they want to be design students and maybe people that are finding out about it for the first time to be in a room and learning, that's really lovely. I'm curious if that worked at U of O. I think at UW, the intro class was quite notoriously cutthroat. Like basically, it was one of the ways to get direct admit was to get above a certain GPA in that class. And then you could also get into the program by submitting portfolio and doing an exam, right, Ginger?
Yeah, like a workshop.
That's right, where you did like some design projects. And so the appeal of being one of the like 10 kids that gets in through that big lecture size class is huge. And I mean, yeah, I think people went a little crazy, kind of like literally sprinting for the teacher sign up sheets and things like that to get critique and whatnot. And I've never been in another class like that, even in like, you know, bio or like math classes that I took. It was interesting.
Well, one of the things that we decided coming in to start this program is that we didn't want to have one of those processes where you don't know if you're in until some point later down the road. So for, you know, there are some programs too that there's a bunch of people until end of sophomore year, and then there's a cut for who gets to continue for junior and senior year. And so we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to have that extra anxiety or cutthroatness. So you can apply any year to get into this program. Yes, seats fill up. There's only so many folks that we can take. And so it gets harder the later that you hear about it. But tenacity is also rewarded. And that doesn't necessarily just mean tenacity in getting your stuff to be great. Tenacity and just really wanting to do it is part of it. And it's considered. So you can get in as a first year fresh person straight out of high school. Like you can apply as part of your application to the University of Oregon, include product design as a part of that. It's still extra application, but same time. Or you can find out about it in that introduction to product design class. And one of the things that we do, like when people come on tours and ask us in the big tour hall for anything that's going on in the College of Design. So we're presenting stuff with architecture and art and digital arts and all of the other faculty in here, that this is something that you can do at any time, but if you're thinking about it, apply now, because then your seat's secured.
Right.
So it's open to everyone as first year fresh person. But then after that, the seats fill up.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So apply early, apply often, just like for anything.
Sounds like MBA.
Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about undergrad, and I think that's what, we all here have experience with, but you went to grad school, and there's a lot of talk about, like, should someone go to grad school for design, why and where? And then maybe you can speak to that with your personal experience in grad school. And then now places are starting to talk about design PhD, and what does that mean? What would you be doing? And again, why? When should someone say, oh, it's time for a PhD?
So grad school, when and why? I think the easiest answer right now in the United States for when and why is if you want to change disciplines. If you want to change disciplines from what you're in and you've been in for a long while, going to grad school so that you can either explore something that you know you want to do, or to a program that you know that they do something that's just different than what you've done, so that you've got a breadth of experience. Those are good things to do. It's a good way to take a break. You get another accolade in it. And sometimes that's just a refreshing way to be able to look at your life and figure out what's important to you. The caveat in that is, how can you do it for the least cost?
Right.
So if you can get into, if you're with an employer who will pay for your school, that's a great way to do it. If you can go to a school that has, not internship programs, but scholarships, for lack of a better word, for things that you can do with your design in particular. And even if it's like most colleges just will do graphic design stuff, they need graphic design for all of the web stuff that they produce predominantly. And so you can use your skills to do that and get a pretty good fellowship doing those things if you just got to look for it. And then you could just pay for it and figure out whether or not, how long it's going to take you to pay yourself back for that experience. For me, I wanted to go into a product design grad program because my undergrad degree was straight up engineering. And I didn't find out about design, as we were talking about earlier, until the one design class that we got. I was like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. And that professor taught me about different grad programs and different types of jobs that would lead me there. And so I applied for grad school and got a job at IDEO at the same time. And I postponed going to grad school so that, because I got a job at IDEO. And that was a way to test out, like, do I really want to go to grad school and do this? Like, this is, it was a good test.
Yeah. And you were doing design at at IDEO, you started doing design work? Nice.
Yeah. But IDEO has a lot of engineering background folks.
Yeah.
And that's just, you're a design engineer. And so you're doing your teams, you might be with people with more industrial design backgrounds as well, but it really depends on the project. They could have been, some of the teams that I worked on were much more engineering heavy. I don't think I ever worked on a project myself that was more industrial designer background heavy, but, mixed up for whatever you're working on.
Yeah. Do you actually see those disciplines as very different, design engineering and industrial design? Like, when you went to grad school, do you think you learned a totally different set of skills?
Totally different set of skills. I'm going to go, no, that doesn't ring true, like in my gut, in my heart.
Maybe a broad way for me to ask the question, but
yeah. But different way of applying skills and the different kinds of ways that you need to look. Like, CAD was a part of mechanical engineering, but the way that I used CAD in design was way different than what I used in mechanical engineering. The amount of knowledge that I learned to extract from vendors, as opposed to figure out yourself, you engineer, was really different. That I learned on the job at IDEO, that I wasn't supposed to figure out everything for myself. And that was actually, I think that's a lesson that I've had to relearn multiple times. I will absolutely get in the weeds. It's one of those comments that was given to me in annual reviews frequently. You're in the weeds, get out of the weeds, Kiersten, move on, like ask someone. Okay. But that's a big difference. I think the engineering background was definitely, figure it out. You got the tools, figure it out.
Yeah. Don't rely on the factory or the vendor to do this. You can do it better. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. But I think sometimes the factory, the vendors, they know what they're doing.
They're professionals too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's see, that was leading to where and when for grad school and then PhD. So internationally right now, if you want to teach, you need a PhD. The United States is like the only place I know of that you don't need a PhD to teach design. And so one of the discussions that like I and my peers will have is like, who's going to get their PhD now so that you can switch jobs, switch places? Do you still need to get one now if you want to switch institutions, if you want to go into an upper administrative job? And some folks are doing that and some folks are not. So that's like, me, I'm in my 50s. Am I going to go back and get a PhD now to do that? I'm not. I'm not interested.
Is there anything that would make you do that?
Is there anything that would make me do that? Now? Today?
Yeah. No. Okay.
No, but I've contemplated it a lot, right? Like it's a contemporary conversation that's happening right now. And so, yeah, I've thought about it a lot. I've had this conversation a lot. And I'm very comfortable with myself, Ginger, right now, being able to say, no, I will not be getting a PhD.
So what's someone going to get out of a PhD program besides the ability to go and teach overseas? What else is it offering them?
That's the main thing that I know of. I don't know a lot of folks in industry that are looking for PhDs in the United States. There are people that I've run into through academics that are at companies that have PhDs in design and are doing things with those companies. And they have, the reason that I run into them is that we tie back into them in research proposals. So we'll do a research proposal to get a grant from like the National Science Foundation, for example. And to tie into industry, we will bring in these folks who have the PhDs have a research background. And so they will be like the person in the industry that we get on board with us. And we do it with industries and companies that don't have those people too, but those are the folks that I run into the most.
Okay.
So, and then the academic discussion for us in schools, like, are we going to start a PhD program? PhD programs are really expensive to start. And so, because you need to be able to fund the PhD candidates while they're learning. And this is very important. If you're going to get a PhD, do not pay for it, be funded. That is appropriate. You should be. And you should be funded by your institution. And it's still hard. You're doing a lot of work for that funding, but you should be funded. And so being able to, like for us, we're still a new enough program that we don't have enough background to be able to start another PhD program right now. And most of the design programs in the US are at small private art and design colleges. I don't know what their funding structures are like to be able to do it, but my assumption is that they will be the first people to be able to do PhDs because they also tie in very strongly with international markets. There are a lot of international folks because of the names of international art and design schools. They're well known everywhere. And so it's more important, relevant to them to be able to have that first. Are you planning on getting a PhD, Ginger? Did I just put the kibosh on your plans?
No, this is so funny. Kate and Margaret kind of did the same thing. I'm like, are you going to do this? I'm like, no, I just hear about it. So I'm curious. I want to know. And we're trying to answer questions. If I'm curious, we've got people listening that wanted to hear this stuff and learning it for the first time. I hope this is helpful. If it is,
Yay! I hope so.
Speak up so that I'm vindicated.
I asked if you wanted to teach. I think that's a super valid question.
Jeez. Anyway, so this kind of ties in because you're talking about how costly it is for a program to start a PhD. We already talked about the relative newness of industrial design programs.
Mm-hmm.
And before we were recording this episode, we talked a little bit about that health of design programs in the US. How does that play into starting a PhD program, or where is the state of undergrad and graduate design programs as a whole? Should we be a little worried?
Yeah. So design programs had this total heyday of growth in like the mid noughties to like, I don't know, 2012 or something like this. And that's not just in the United States. That's like the United States and China, I think, are probably the big growers, but I know of other countries as well. Australia had an influx of programs also. Actually, that's the only other good example that I know. But there were a bunch that started up at other, and it was like all the art institutes in America. There were multiple state schools that started design programs. And so like there was a lot. And then with the couple of big downturns that we've had during that same time, so the market crash in 2008 was really important to me because that was the year that we started at UO.
Oh, wow.
And the very first administrative meeting that I attended when I came here that fall, the announcement was made at the very start that all new programs would be canceled. I was like,
oh my
wait,
gosh.
what? I just got here. And the person who said it immediately looked at me, and the struck look on my face, I assume, and was like, well, not you.
Oh.
and the meeting went on from there. But that was the moment that I think affected me and the growth of our program here. Was like, we got to make sure we're financially sustainable. We got to make sure we're financially sustainable. We got to make sure that we're financially sustainable was like really important to me for a long, long while after that.
Mm.
So that wasn't design specific. That was all new programs. Mm-hmm. Design programs sort of grew. And then there has been a crash in design programs, like all of those art institutes going away.
Right.
And then just a crash in general with smaller colleges. So in Oregon, we lost one of our main art and design colleges, Oregon College of Arts and Crafts. And it was this kind of long, slow decline. We lost an art institute that started at the same time that we started the product design program here at UO. And then we lost another small college that had a really well-known art program, all within the course of 3 years. We were absorbing students like crazy from all of these programs. And that was happening all over the country. Like with the art institutes, there were art institutes all over the place. There are some other programs for schools that have branches, where all of the branches that had branched off started being consolidated back to the branches went away. Right. Or we call it consolidating back to the home campus. So we had that. And then right after that, then we had COVID. And all institutions of higher learning lost a ton of students with COVID. And so we're still at the point now of trying to figure out, where is everyone? And are people coming back? And what do they want to come back to? Like, is everyone going to come back and want to go into healthcare? Like, that's a thing that that happens when there's a big, like during the .com bust, there were all these people studying business, and then no one wanted to study business right after that. So like, is with the COVID thing, is everyone going to want to study healthcare, and then something happens and no one's going to want to be in healthcare for a while? Like, We don't know. So
Mm.
where we are in design is not like a main contributor to this conversation right now. So we're kind of hanging out, waiting to see what happens with everyone else. And I'm assuming that's going to happen for the next 3 to 5 years, is sort of this, let's see how everything plays out, period.
Wow.
Do you think that because of the prices of higher education, a lot of people who wanted to go into arts started just learning by themselves?
Ooh.
Especially with so much time they were locked at home, and you could learn from YouTube, like a lot of 3D software, rendering, sketching.
Also boot camps.
For like much smaller prices. And I think like a lot of people from younger generation, which is funny to say because it's not like we're old, we're also 3 of us new to the industry. But I think people figure out that all that matters is portfolio and how to make a good portfolio, maybe without all the depth of the design that you can bring from the university. You're still good enough to get an internship, learn on the job without taking that for 50K or whatever it costs.
I think I'm not the person to ask for that. I think that would be better to go to someone who's in industry and like in reviewing portfolios coming straight in. I don't know. I don't know if folks are going straight to that. I do know that like I'll refer students to things that are on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I really like about that is that it's always there. Like I'm not always there. Like even when I'm like really on and I'm teaching really great, I still go away at the end of class. But the YouTube video is still going to be there. So if I can find a good one that I can refer someone to, I'll do that. But there are big gaping holes in that though too.
Yes.
I have been looking like crazy for anyone teaching CAD who is a female person.
Wow, really?
Anyone listening to this, if you would please email me and tell me. I have seriously searched, and I have searched like not only just like, you know, the Google search over YouTube for all of the CADs, but like I've looked in like Udacity and Coursera and Khan Academy, like, and I have found no female persons teaching any form of CAD.
That's wild. Wow. Well, if one of our women listeners wants to be that person, maybe this is your kick in the pants to go start your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Or work with me on figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, you know, I feel like there's something that you do get from going to design school that is hard to fabricate elsewhere. But when I really try to dig into what I think that is, it's pretty hazy. You know, it's like maybe the integration of the design history in classes where you're talking about the history and the products that you're being asked to make. Maybe it's just the studio hours and kind of like the grind of that, but you can get that in a consultancy or an early job.
I think it's a process, and thinking that it's all about how the product will make sense and how to make it as simple as possible versus thinking how to make it look as cool as possible and add a whole bunch of details which are not necessary and don't add any more value than just cosmetics. I think you need professor basically like hitting you on your head with the ruler and pointing you out how you don't have the core meaning of a product. But also this is something you would learn pretty fast on your first internship if you're smart and you have this intuition for design.
Yeah.
We're also fortunate in that we didn't have to go to design school during COVID. I've heard that it's been difficult to truly create that educational space over Zoom. Is that something that you found difficult as well?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, running a studios over Zoom. One of the things that I did with a studio over Zoom was to make sure that the project that we were working on, they had to work with someone else. Like and not someone in the class, actually, like a you have a user. And you are going to talk to this user, and that's going to be a part of the class. And you have like a weekly thing. It was an assignment, a weekly thing. You have an assignment, a weekly assignment that you have to talk to this user about this thing that you are researching. One of the projects that I did was actually a phone, a communication device, and how that could be better. Another was a mailbox, which is actually kind of a communication device too. And those were things that, like, how can it not just be, you and the screen and me and the screen talking about this thing? Because even like, the breakout rooms, it's still just so like, ooh, it was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. And having other relationships, I guess, that you needed to foster seemed like an important part to me of what design was about, that we could get in that way that you couldn't get in other ways.
That makes sense.
I don't know. It stunk.
Seems like a smart way to try to create that. I think also potentially like the fabrication or prototyping process beyond just a 3D printer, like really what it feels like to make something into a 3-dimensional object and how it changes when you try to do that. That would be pretty hard to
for sure
get students to experience without shop access or whatnot. Yeah. How did you try to tackle that one?
I sent a lot of supply. The budgets for the class ended up being mailing things to people.
Wow.
Like, here's your packet for the phone project. Everyone got like a used iPhone. And like, here's your iPhone. You're going to take the sucker apart. You're going to put it back together. You're going to see how big all the parts are and like what kind of space needs that you have. Because you don't have a big shop and you might be working at the kitchen table with your mom.
Yeah.
So what's small and doesn't involve like the bandsaw, right?
Right.
A lot of cardboard.
Yeah.
Shipped out a lot of cardboard.
That's interesting, because I think another complaint that's a common thread for students exiting design school is that materials cost so much. I mean, we had cardboard projects and we had to buy it. I guess your really rough prototypes, you could just use the Amazon box or whatever bullshit. But for the final thing, you had to buy the nice stuff, and it kind of adds up if you screw up, or you aren't very good at planning your pattern. Do you think that so the department took on the shipping costs for some of these materials, right? Do you think that took some weight off of the students?
Yeah, one of the things that we try to do, and it doesn't help for all situations, like getting the prettiest cardboard that you want, but we have a material fee associated with the class. And so if we know that you're doing a furniture project, if we know that you're doing a phone project, if we know that you're doing a blender project, we're going to buy the wood or the phones or the motors for you so that you have that, so that everyone has that. And because it's a part of the cost of the course, it can be part of someone's financial aid.
Right. Okay.
If everything comes on top, then it can't be financial aid for people. So it's one thing, it's one small thing, but it is a thing. Another thing that's actually helpful in this digital age is paper. Like, one of the things that a lot of design schools have totally done away with is posters. We don't have you do a poster, or we don't have you mount the poster to foam core. And because we can do a digital presentation, or we can do tile pages with a digital presentation, so that, but that was a huge cost for me. And we've tried to do away with that as well.
Nice.
Or even just do like an 8.5 by 11, or it's a series of 8.5 by 11s, so that cost goes down to nothing. Or you, like, if it is a poster, we'll have that be the materials cost for the course. It's actually a good thing about 3D printing as well. If you know the kind of size constraints around a project, like if you're doing a blender and you know that that's not going to take more than 2 pounds of material per person, then that's something that you can buy ahead of time with those material costs, so that everyone has that and you can just use that for everyone's blenders. So it's a little easier now than it was to be able to do some of those things to help people with the costs. And then another thing that we try to do is and a lot of folks do this in different ways. either sponsorships from companies or grants, and use the grants to get your materials
Right.
or sponsorships. So again, it's still like every student is still going to be like, yeah, but I want to use this thing that's going to be perfect. And,
what are we, designers or something?
Yeah. And the people that have the money to do that can still do that. And the people that don't.
Yeah.
But those are some of the things that we try to do.
Okay.
That makes sense. I have a question relating back to your understanding that you really wanted your own work to feel valued, right? It's sort of what drove you to move jobs and things like that. How do you give that feeling to your students? And how do you show them that feeling matters? That their work actually has meaning or has like longevity?
Well, I'll tell you the things that I think about. And the things that are going through my head, I'm like, I wonder if whatever student is listening to this, they'd be like, well, that doesn't affect me, but I'll tell you what I think. One of the things that I do for that, I think it's important for them to see the value of their fellow students and to be able to feel their fellow students valuing them. So, having in the advanced studios that I teach, there's always a service project where you write down 2 things that you think you're master of at that point in time, and 2 things that you would really like help with. And then I do a matchup of people who are like, what are the services that people want to provide? And what are the services that people want? So that they have to work on someone else's project. Whatever they have done has to be in the final presentation. The final presentation has to give credit to the person who worked on it, like an acknowledgement of some kind. And to me, that's one of the things that this is how you're going to work in an ecosystem. And not everyone is the best sketcher. Not everyone is the best CAD. Not everyone has the best 2D visual presentation. So who does, and can you get help from them? And you're going to learn from them just because they're going to do it for you. And you're going to have to consult with them to do it. But you're also going to be valued in your, what do I offer that I can really give to someone? And they're going to show that I did that in their presentation and tell everyone that I did it. So that's important to me. That's one of the important things to me, to help people see their own value and make them feel it. Having exhibitions is another really important thing to us as a program here. One of the things that we found when we very first started the program was a lot of the students that we had, being a state school and being in Oregon, which is one of these smaller states population-wise, a lot of people had never left the state.
Mm-hmm.
And so having exhibitions that were not just here, but were like in New York or in Milan or in Frankfurt was really important to us, to get people out and to have them see that their work could get out and be part of the international discussion of design. And I think that that's something that's actually really unique to design education as well. If you're studying mechanical engineering, if I'm studying mechanical engineering, it was never like, well, I wonder what the mechanical engineers in Germany think about this. Whereas, in design,
not falling apart.
Yeah. In design, that's really important. What do the designers in Germany think about this? And that's something that you talk about every day in your education. So getting students out and students' work out is really important to us in this program.
That's really cool. Now I wish we had done something kind of like that. I guess there's exchange, study abroad kind of thing, but that's not very accessible.
Yeah,
that was a concern. I couldn't afford that.
That's fair. It was cheaper for me to study abroad than to have a semester here because of they give you in-state tuition if you're an out-of-state kid.
Oh, interesting.
Which was interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
But then there's still costs associated with flying and stuff, so it certainly wasn't cheap. But yeah, I think those are really, really thoughtful answers to that question.
Oh, good. Thank you for saying something. I have just worried now about any of my students being like, yeah, I didn't care about that.
Well, students will always feel that way about everything a little bit, right? But I'm sure you're also like having lots of positive impacts. And other educators will hopefully hear this too, which is maybe more significant. Well, I think we can lead into our signature Beyond Ray questions, unless Ginger or Margaret, you have anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I think we've gone through a lot more than we originally planned already.
I'm excited for the secret question.
I go first?
Yeah, how
Okay.
about that?
Okay, cool. Our secret question, not so secret probably anymore. Kiersten, what is your favorite color?
Today, talking to you, this has been so nice. I'm very happy. So it's got to be like pink, like hot pink.
Ooh,
Nice.
Happy.
So it's
pink.
mood dependent.
That's a happy pink.
I like it, and I didn't expect it from a mechanical engineer by degree.
Actually, one of my joys, I got to say, when going to a faculty meeting of designers is to wear the brightest color clothes I can find in my closet.
Yes.
Because everyone is always in black.
Oh, God. Every time somebody points that out, I realize that we're here recording all in black. It's an accident. It's just like the uniform. Look at this.
Yeah, me too.
All of us. Oh, man, that's really funny.
I have my stolen Airbnb hoodie.
Good stuff, Margaret.
It was in the closet?
Oh, no, it's from Airbnb.
Oh.
Yeah.
Branded.
Yeah, from Airbnb, the company.
Nice.
Not like someone's house.
Better than finding something in the closet.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. Okay, Kiersten, and then my other classic question for you is, when you think about yourself in the field of design, the field of teaching, what is something that you bring that you think is really uniquely yours?
I'll say that wonderfully at this point in my life, having done a lot of things, I get the wonderful asset of being able to say baloney. That's baloney. That is a baloney, whatever. And not, I don't just mean to student projects. I mean to like in, academic discussions or whatever else is going on with work. And that's a difficult thing to do. And I honestly, I think it's particularly difficult for women to do it.
Totally.
But being able, I'm very happy about that right now too, is being able to say no and baloney
I love
to
that.
things that are.
Be joyful in saying no and baloney.
Yeah. But I also got to say that in general, like in skills, man, I will be your CAD person in any kind of CAD, even the ones that I don't know yet. I'm happy to learn it and happy to do it. That is a skill. Like, what do I bring? That's a happy place for me. Like, I have fun with that.
Yeah.
When I have CAD questions, I'm going to call you up then.
Agree.
Well, that's why I've been looking for all the YouTubers. It's in here. It's back in here in my brain somewhere that someone should do this.
I think that might be, you're not getting a PhD, so it sounds like you got a lot of time on your hands. Next phase. Thank you so much for talking to us. It's been really fun. Do you want people to be able to find you or get in touch in any way? If so, feel free to share.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy. I'm the only one with that long last name at the University of Oregon, or in the state of Oregon for that matter. But my email address is Kiersten, KIERSTEN @uoregon.edu.
Awesome. And we are the Seattle WID group. You can find our Instagram, WID_Seattle, and the BeyondRayPodcast.com.
But yeah, thank you, Kiersten, for being on our show. It's been a really enlightening conversation about education. And I'm sure that your students miss you and they can't wait for you to be back from sabbatical.
Oh, I hope so. Thanks, y'all. It has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time. And it's nice to be able to talk about education and design education.